The sun had barely touched the golden-tipped peaks of the Rocky Mountains when Madeline Kerrigan knew today would be the day her carefully constructed world would collapse. She could tell by the dust cloud rising on the horizon, by the approaching thunder of hooves, and by the sinking feeling in her stomach that had awakened her before dawn. The creditors were finally coming to collect. Georgetown, Colorado, in 1879 was a bustling silver mining town nestled in the mountains. But for Madeline, the past year had transformed it from a place of comfort to a prison of anxiety. Her father, once the respected owner of Kerrigan Mining Supply, now lay bedridden in the back room of their modest home, his body ravaged by consumption and his reputation tarnished by mounting debts. Madeline stood on the porch, her slender fingers clutching the worn wooden railing. At 22, she had grown accustomed to shouldering burdens beyond her years. Her mother's death during childbirth had left her father to raise her alone, and now their roles had reversed. For months, she had managed the failing business, nursed her father, and fended off creditors with promises of payment that grew increasingly hollow. The riders approached with purpose, three men, their expressions grim beneath the brims of their hats. Madeline recognized Franklin Holloway, the banker, and his two associates. Martin Wheeler, a loan shark from Denver who'd provided her father with capital when the bank refused, and Samuel Briggs, Wheeler's enforcer whose reputation for collecting debts by any means necessary preceded him. "Miss Kerrigan," Holloway called out, dismounting with a formality that did nothing to mask his intentions. "I believe you know why we're here." Madeline's chin lifted slightly. "Mr. Holloway, I've told you repeatedly that we need more time." "The new shipment of tools, time has run out, Miss Kerrigan," Wheeler interrupted, his voice cutting through the crisp mountain air. "Your father owes me over $2,000 plus interest. We've been more than patient." Behind her, she heard the door creak open. Despite her protests, her father had dragged himself from his sick. Thomas Kerrigan leaned heavily against the doorframe, his once robust frame now skeletal, his face ashen. "Leave my daughter out of this," he wheezed. "The debt is mine." Wheeler's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile on a kinder face. "Indeed it is, Thomas, and since you clearly cannot pay it, we've come to an arrangement that might satisfy all parties." Madeline moved protectively in front of her father. "What arrangement?" "Your father's business is worthless now," Holloway stated flatly. "But you, Miss Kerrigan, could work off the debt." The implication hung in the air like a thundercloud. Madeline's blood ran cold. "I'm offering employment for you in Denver," Wheeler elaborated, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "At my establishment. Room and board provided, of course. Within 3 years, perhaps less with your attributes, your father's debt would be cleared." Thomas Kerrigan lurched forward. "Never, my daughter is not collateral." "Then I suggest you produce $2,000 by sundown," Briggs finally spoke, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. "Father, go back inside," Madeline urged, helping him toward the door. She turned back to the men. "I need until tomorrow, just one more day." Wheeler shook his head. "We ride out this evening, either with the money or with you, Miss Kerrigan. Your choice." As the men remounted their horses, Madeline felt the world closing in around her. She had exactly 8 hours to produce a sum that might as well have been $1 million. Inside, she helped her father back to bed, soothing his agitation with promises she had no way to keep. Once he drifted into a fitful sleep, she sank into a chair at the kitchen table and buried her face in her hands. The store had been closed for weeks, their savings depleted by medicine and doctors. There was nothing left to sell, no one left to borrow from. A knock at the back door startled her. She opened it to find Mrs. Abernathy, their elderly neighbor who sometimes sat with her father. "I saw those men," the old woman said without preamble. "Nothing good comes when Wheeler rides into town." Madeline stepped aside to let her in. "They want money we don't have, Mrs. Abernathy's wrinkled face creased with concern. "How much?" $2,000. By sundown. The old woman's sharp intake of breath confirmed what Madeline already knew. It was an impossible sum. "Or they'll take me to Denver, to work in Wheeler's establishment." Madeline couldn't bring herself to say brothel, though they both knew what Wheeler owned in Denver. Mrs. Abernathy clutched Madeline's hand. "Child, you must find another way. If you could stay with father, I need to try something." The old woman nodded, settling herself by Thomas Kerrigan's bedside as Madeline donned her shawl and stepped out into the morning light. Georgetown was already alive with activity. Miners heading to their shifts, merchants opening shops, wagons delivering goods. Madeline walked briskly toward Main Street, her mind racing. She had appealed to her father's former friends weeks ago, finding sympathy but no financial assistance. The bank had made it clear they would extend no further credit. She paused outside the Silver Dollar Saloon. Women didn't enter such establishments in daylight, not respectable women. Anyway, but desperation pushed her through the swinging doors. The bartender looked up in surprise. A few early patrons turned to stare. Conversations momentarily halted. "Miss Kerrigan." The bartender, a heavy-set man named O'Malley, frowned. "This ain't no place for you." "I need to speak with Mr. Quinn," she said, referring to the saloon's owner. O'Malley's frown deepened. "He's not here, won't be till noon." Madeline's shoulders slumped. Another dead end. "Something I can help you with," the voice came from a corner table. Madeline turned to see a man she didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wasn't dressed like the local miners or townsmen. His clothing was practical but well-made. Dark trousers, a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a vest. A gun belt was slung low on his hips, and she noted the well-worn handle of his revolver. "This doesn't concern you, McAllister," O'Malley said, but there was a note of respect in his voice. The stranger, McAllister, didn't take his eyes off Madeline. "Let the lady speak for herself." Madeline hesitated. She had come to the saloon out of desperation, hoping Quinn might advance her money against future work as a server or cook. But Quinn wasn't here, and she had no time to waste. "I'm looking for work," she said simply. "Urgently." McAllister gestured to the chair across from him. After a moment's deliberation, Madeline crossed the room and sat down. "Quentin McAllister," he introduced himself, his voice carrying the faint drawl of Texas or perhaps Oklahoma. "Madeline Kerrigan, Thomas Kerrigan's daughter." When she nodded, he continued, "I knew your father years back. Good man. I heard he's been ill." "Yes." She saw no point in elaborating. "Mr. McAllister, I don't mean to be rude, but unless you're hiring, I should continue my search elsewhere." "What kind of work are you looking for, Miss Kerrigan? And why the urgency?" Madeline studied him, trying to gauge whether he could be trusted. Something in his direct gaze, devoid of the pity or lecherous assessment she'd grown accustomed to, made her decide to speak plainly. "My father borrowed money from Martin Wheeler, a considerable sum. They've come to collect, and since we can't pay, they intend to take me to Denver as payment." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "I have until sundown to find another solution." McAllister's expression hardened. "Wheeler, I know the type." He was silent for a moment, then asked, "How much?" $2,000. He let out a low whistle. "That's a steep price. My father's business was failing. Wheeler was the only one willing to lend when the equipment broke down and the new mine contract fell through." She stood abruptly. "I shouldn't have bothered you." "Good day." Mr. McAllister. Sit down, Miss Kerrigan. It wasn't an order, but something in his tone made her comply. I may be able to help. Hope flared briefly before caution dampened it. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. I knew your father when I was just starting out. He extended credit to me when no one else would. McAllister's eyes held a distant memory. Said he believed in giving folks a fair chance. Madeline remembered those days when her father's business had been prosperous, and he'd often helped newcomers to the area. Before the accident at the Independence, mine had damaged his lungs and started his decline. What do you do, Mr. McAllister? A hint of a smile touched his lips. A little of this, a little of that. Currently, I'm delivering a herd of horses to the Army fort near Denver. A horse trader, then. Or perhaps a rancher. Either way, it seemed unlikely he'd have $2,000 to spare. I appreciate the sentiment, she said, rising again, but I need more than kind words. I didn't offer words, Miss Kerrigan. He stood as well, towering over her. I'll pay your father's debt. Madeline stared at him, stunned. Why would you do that? Let's just say I have my reasons, and I have a particular dislike for men like Wheeler. And what would you expect in return? She asked warily. She'd had enough of men's generous offers today. McAllister's expression remained impassive. We can discuss that after we deal with your immediate problem. Where can I find Wheeler and his men? They're staying at the Georgetown hotel. They plan to leave at sundown. Then we have time. He reached for his hat. I need to see to some business first. Meet me at the bank at 4 o'clock. Mr. McAllister, she called as he headed for the door. How do I know you'll be there? He turned, and for the first time she saw a full smile transform his face. You don't. But I've never broken a promise yet, and I don't intend to start today. With that, he was gone, leaving Madeline to wonder if she'd just encountered a savior or another charlatan. Either way, she had no better options. The hours crawled by. Madeline returned home to find her father awake and Mrs. Abernathy preparing a thin soup. She said nothing of her encounter with McAllister, not wanting to raise false hopes. Instead, she helped with household chores and sorted through the last of their possessions, looking for anything of value. By 3:30, she had assembled a small collection. Her mother's silver hairbrush, a pocket watch that had belonged to her grandfather, and a small golden locket containing miniature portraits of her parents. Together, they might fetch $50, nowhere near enough, but better than nothing. She kissed her father's forehead, promised Mrs. Abernathy she would return soon, and set out for the bank with her pitiful offerings wrapped in a handkerchief. The streets were busy with the afternoon bustle. Madeline walked quickly, her gaze fixed ahead, ignoring the sympathetic glances from those who had heard of her predicament. Georgetown was too small for secrets. The bank stood imposingly at the corner of Main and 6th, its brick facade and large windows projecting prosperity and permanence. Madeline hesitated on the steps, scanning the street for any sign of McAllister. There was none. Her heart sank. It had been foolish to pin her hopes on a stranger's promise. She was about to turn away when a hand touched her elbow. Miss Kerrigan. Quentin McAllister stood beside her, dressed now in a clean shirt and jacket, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun. Relief washed over her. You came. I said I would. He nodded toward the bank. Shall we? Inside, the cool air smelled of polished wood and ink. Franklin Holloway looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from professional welcome to wariness as he recognized Madeline and her companion. Miss Kerrigan, he acknowledged, I believe our business is concluded until this evening. McAllister stepped forward. Actually, we've come to settle the Kerrigan debt in full. Holloway's eyebrows rose. Have you indeed? And who might you be, sir? Quentin McAllister. I understand Thomas Kerrigan owes Martin Wheeler $2,000 with Holloway Banking acting as intermediary. The banker leaned back in his chair. That is correct, though with interest and fees the total comes to $2,347. Madeline's heart sank further. Even if McAllister had been prepared to pay the original sum, this new figure seemed designed to thwart any rescue attempt, but McAllister merely nodded. "I'd like to see the loan documentation, please." Something in his tone made Holloway comply without argument. He produced a folder and spread several papers on the desk. McAllister reviewed them carefully, occasionally asking questions that revealed a surprising knowledge of financial matters. "These interest rates are excessive," he commented at one point. Holloway's lips thinned. "Mr. Wheeler sets his own terms. The borrower agreed to them." "When a man is desperate, he'll agree to almost anything," McAllister replied mildly, "especially when he believes he has no choice." He straightened and reached into his jacket, producing a leather wallet. From it, he counted out a stack of bills and placed them on the desk. $2,347. "I'd like a receipt indicating the debt is paid in full, with all liens against Kerrigan property released." Madeline stared at the money more cash than she had ever seen in one place than at McAllister. Who was this man who could produce such a sum so casually? Holloway seemed equally surprised but recovered quickly. He counted the money twice, then prepared the necessary paperwork. "Mr. Wheeler will want to verify this himself," he said as he handed McAllister the receipt. "By all means, we'll go to him next." McAllister tucked the document safely away. "Good day, Mr. Holloway." Outside, Madeline found her voice at last. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We still need to inform Wheeler that his collection plans have changed." He offered her his arm. "Shall we?" The Georgetown Hotel was the finest establishment in town, though that wasn't saying much in a mining community. The lobby featured worn carpets and furniture that had once been fashionable a decade ago in Denver. Wheeler and Briggs occupied a corner table in the adjoining restaurant, plates of roast beef before them. They looked up as Madeline and McAllister approached. "Miss Kerrigan," Wheeler drawled, his gaze sliding from her to her companion. "I see you found an escort. How enterprising of you." "Mr. Wheeler," she acknowledged stiffly. "This is Mr. McAllister." McAllister remained standing, his posture relaxed but alert. "I've settled Thomas Kerrigan's debt in full." He produced the receipt from Holloway. "His obligation to you is discharged." Wheeler's face betrayed shock before settling into suspicion. He took the receipt, examining it closely. "This is unexpected." He looked up at McAllister. "May I ask why you've taken such an interest in the Kerrigans' affairs?" "You may ask," McAllister replied evenly. "Miss Kerrigan will be remaining in Georgetown with her father. Your services are no longer required." Wheeler's eyes narrowed. "I see. And what services will she be providing for you in return for this?" "Generosity." Madeline felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, McAllister's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Be very careful with your next words, Wheeler. The lady's reputation isn't open for discussion." Something in McAllister's tone made Wheeler reconsider whatever he had been about to say. Briggs shifted in his seat, his hand moving toward his gun. "I wouldn't," McAllister said without looking at him. His calm was more unnerving than any show of anger would have been. After a tense moment, Wheeler forced a smile. "No offense intended, of course. Business is business after all." He folded the receipt and tucked it into his vest pocket. "If the debt is settled, our transaction is complete." "We're agreed, then." McAllister nodded once. "Miss Kerrigan and I will take our leave. Enjoy your meal, gentlemen." As they walked out of the hotel, Madeline realized she had been holding her breath. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the pine-scented mountain air. "Is it really over?" she asked, hardly daring to believe it. "It is." McAllister guided her away from the hotel. "Wheeler's not happy, but he's a businessman first. He got his money." "I still don't understand why you did this." He glanced down at her. "Let's get you home to your father. I imagine he's worried." They walked in silence for a few minutes, Madeline acutely aware of the tall figure beside her and the curious glances from townspeople they passed. By evening, gossip about Quentin McAllister's intervention would have spread throughout Georgetown. At the Kerrigan home, Mrs. Abernathy met them at the door, her expression anxious until she saw Madeline's face. "It's all right," Madeline assured her. "The debt is paid." The old woman's eyes widened as she looked at McAllister. "Well, the Lord does work in mysterious ways. Your father's asking for you, dear." Madeline turned to McAllister. "Please come in. My father will want to thank you himself." Inside, she found Thomas Kerrigan sitting up in bed, his breathing labored but his eyes clearer than they had been in days. "Father, this is Mr. Quentin McAllister. He settled our debt with Wheeler." Thomas studied the tall man who stood in the doorway of his small bedroom. "McAllister," he repeated, his voice raspy. "I remember you, young cowhand who needed supplies on credit. Must have been 15 years ago." 17, McAllister corrected with a small smile. "You outfitted me when I was heading to Wyoming, told me to pay when I could." "And did you?" Thomas asked. "Yes, sir. 6 months later. You probably don't remember." "I remember." Thomas gestured weakly. "Come closer, son." McAllister approached the bed, removing his hat. "Why would you pay my debt?" Thomas asked bluntly. "It's a considerable sum. I've been fortunate in my endeavors since those early days. When I heard about your situation, it seemed fitting to return the favor." Thomas's gaze was penetrating despite his illness. "And my daughter. What are your intentions there?" "Father," Madeline protested, but McAllister held up a hand. "A fair question, sir. I have no expectations regarding Miss Kerrigan. The debt is paid with no strings attached." Thomas studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Then I thank you, Mr. McAllister. Not many would do what you've done. You'd be surprised what people might do when given the chance." McAllister replaced his hat. "I should be going. I have arrangements to make before dark." "Where are you staying?" Madeline asked, following him to the door. "I've taken a room at the boarding house near the livery." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be in Georgetown for a few days while I complete some business. May I call on you tomorrow to discuss repayment terms?" His eyes softened. "There are no terms, Miss Kerrigan. But I would welcome your company if you wish to call." After he left, Madeline stood on the porch, watching his retreating figure. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The deadline that had loomed so ominously that morning had passed, and she was still here, still free. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or what this strange twist of fate meant for her future. But for the first time in months, she felt something close to hope. The following morning dawned clear and cool, typical for early June in the Colorado mountains. Madeline rose early, having slept better than she had in months. She prepared a simple breakfast for her father, pleased to see him eat with more appetite than usual. "What do you know of this McAllister?" Thomas asked as she cleared the dishes. Madeline considered the question. "Very little. He seems well established now, though he mentioned delivering horses to an army fort. He knew financial terms when reviewing the loan documents." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I remember him as a determined young man, hard worker, honest." He coughed, a harsh sound that reminded Madeline of his fragility. "Be careful, Madeline. We don't want to trade one obligation for another." "He said there were no terms," she reminded him. "But I intend to repay him somehow when we're able." Pride, Thomas murmured with a small smile. Your mother was the same way, never wanted to owe anyone anything. Madeline kissed his forehead. Rest now. Mrs. Abernathy will be here soon to sit with you. I need to go into town for supplies. She changed into her best day dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days but was still presentable, and arranged her chestnut hair in a neat bun. Looking in the mirror, she noted the dark circles under her eyes had faded somewhat, though worry had left its mark on her young face. The walk to town gave her time to collect her thoughts. What did one say to a man who had saved you from a fate worse than death? Thank you seemed woefully inadequate. Mrs. Jenkins's boarding house was a tidy two-story structure with a small front garden. The proprietress herself answered Madeline's knock. Miss Kerrigan, she greeted with barely concealed curiosity. Are you looking for Mr. McAllister by any chance? News traveled fast in Georgetown. Yes, if he's available. He left at dawn, Mrs. Jenkins replied. Said he had business at the livery. You might try there. Thanking her, Madeline continued to the livery stable at the edge of town. The smell of hay and horses greeted her as she approached. Inside the large barn, she found Hank Morris, the liveryman, deep in conversation with McAllister beside a corral containing several fine-looking horses. McAllister spotted her first, his expression warming. Miss Kerrigan, good morning. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, suddenly unsure of herself. Not at all. Hank and I were just concluding our business. He turned back to the liveryman. We're agreed then. $20 for stabling the herd until Friday, Morris nodded. That's fair. Though I still say you could get a better price if you waited for the cavalry purchasing agent. Perhaps, but I have a buyer in Denver who's expecting delivery by Saturday. McAllister shook the man's hand. I appreciate your help, Hank. As Morris moved away to tend to other tasks, McAllister turned his full attention to Madeline. In the morning light, she noticed details she had missed yesterday. The fine lines around his eyes that suggested he spent much time outdoors, the small scar at the corner of his jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. How is your father today? He asked, gesturing for her to walk with him toward the corral. Better, I think. He remembers you. I'm glad to hear it. Thomas Kerrigan made an impression on me when I was young and struggling. Madeline studied the horses in the corral, a dozen strong, healthy animals that showed signs of careful breeding. These are yours. Part of the herd I'm delivering, yes. Pride was evident in his voice. I raise quarter horses on my ranch in Wyoming. These are destined for the cavalry. You're a rancher, then, he nodded. Among other things, I've dabbled in various enterprises over the years. Successful ones, apparently, she observed, thinking of the casual way he had produced over $2,000. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. I've been fortunate. Hard work, some good investments, and perhaps a bit of luck. They walked in companionable silence for a moment before Madeline spoke again. Mr. McAllister, I came to discuss repayment. While I can't offer anything substantial now, I want you to know that I intend to honor my father's debt to you. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Miss Kerrigan, there is no debt, but you paid a considerable sum. I did so freely, without expectation of repayment. I can't accept that, she insisted. My father raised me to meet my obligations. Whether it takes months or years, I will repay you. McAllister studied her, amusement and admiration mingling in his gaze. Your determination does you credit. But what if I told you there's something you could do for me that would be far more valuable than money? Wariness crept into her expression. And what would that be? Have dinner with me this evening, he said simply. I find myself in want of pleasant company, and you strike me as a woman of intelligence and character. Madeline blinked in surprise. Of all the possible requests, this was not one she had anticipated. Dinner at the hotel restaurant, if that's acceptable. 7 o'clock. When she hesitated, he added, "Consider it the beginning of your repayment if it eases your conscience." A dinner invitation was hardly adequate compensation for $2,000, but Madeline found herself nodding. "Very well, Mr. McAllister. I'll meet you there at 7. Excellent." He tipped his hat. "Until this evening, Miss Kerrigan." As Madeline walked back through town, her mind whirled with questions. Who exactly was Quentin McAllister? A rancher, certainly, but there seemed to be more to him than that. His manner was that of an educated man, yet he carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to the hardships of frontier life. She stopped at the general store to purchase the few supplies they could now afford, aware of the speculative glances from other customers. By now, everyone in Georgetown would know that Quentin McAllister had paid the Kerrigan debt and prevented Martin Wheeler from taking her to Denver. "Miss Kerrigan," called Sarah Miller, the store owner's wife, as she wrapped Madeline's purchases. "I heard about what happened yesterday." Such a blessing that Mr. McAllister appeared when he did. "Yes," Madeline agreed simply, not wanting to encourage gossip. Mrs. Miller leaned forward conspiratorially. "They say he's quite wealthy now, though he started with nothing. Owns one of the largest horse ranches in Wyoming, according to my cousin who lives in Laramie." "Is that so?" Madeline kept her tone neutral. "Indeed, and unmarried from what I understand." The woman's meaningful look made her implication clear. "Thank you for the supplies, Mrs. Miller." Madeline gathered her parcels and made a dignified exit, her cheeks warm with embarrassment. At home, she found her father sleeping peacefully with Mrs. Abernathy knitting beside his bed. The old woman looked up as Madeline entered. "He's had a good morning," she reported. "Even ate a full bowl of broth." Madeline's shoulders relaxed slightly. "That's encouraging." After putting away the supplies, she hesitated, then said, "Mrs. Abernathy, Mr. McAllister has invited me to dinner at the hotel this evening. Would you mind staying a bit longer with Father?" The old woman's eyes twinkled. "Not at all, dear. I brought my night clothes just in case." "It's only dinner," Madeline felt compelled to clarify, "to thank him for his assistance." "Of course." Mrs. Abernathy's tone was carefully neutral, but her smile spoke volumes. "You should wear your green dress, the one with the lace collar. It brings out the color of your eyes." Despite her protests, Madeline found herself following the suggestion. The green dress was one of the few nice garments she still owned, saved for special occasions that had become increasingly rare. As she dressed that evening, she wondered why she was taking such care with her appearance for a simple thank-you dinner. The Georgetown Hotel restaurant was moderately busy when she arrived. McAllister was already there, seated at a corner table. He rose as she approached, his eyes appreciative as they took in her appearance. "Miss Kerrigan, you look lovely." He held her chair with a courtly gesture that seemed at odds with his rugged exterior. "Thank you." She settled into her seat, uncomfortably aware of the curious glances from other diners. "And thank you for the invitation." He signaled the waiter, ordering a bottle of wine without consulting the menu. "I hope you don't mind. They have a decent Bordeaux that complements the roast beef. You're familiar with the hotel's offerings?" "I've stayed here before, on my way to and from Denver." The wine arrived, and he waited for the waiter to pour before continuing. "Georgetown is a convenient stop when traveling between my ranch and the markets." As the evening progressed, Madeline found herself increasingly intrigued by her dinner companion. Quentin McAllister was well-spoken and knowledgeable on a wide range of subjects, from horse breeding to literature. He spoke of his ranch in Wyoming with evident pride, describing the land and the home he had built there. "It's not a mansion," he said with a self-deprecating smile, "but it's comfortable. 4 bedrooms, a study, a kitchen large enough to feed a crew during roundup." "It sounds wonderful," Madeline replied, trying to imagine such a place. Her own home, while once comfortable, had always been modest. "It can be lonely," he admitted, surprising her with his candor. "Especially in winter when the snow makes travel difficult." "Don't you have family?" He shook his head. "My parents died when I was young. I was raised by an uncle who had little interest in children. I left home at 16 to make my own way." He took a sip of wine. "What about you? Your father mentioned your mother passed away when I was born," Madeline confirmed. "It was just father and me until his illness." "You've shown remarkable strength in caring for him," McAllister observed. "Many would have surrendered to circumstances long ago." "What choice did I have?" She straightened her shoulders. "He sacrificed everything to raise me. I couldn't abandon him when he needed me most." "Loyalty," he said softly, "a rare and valuable trait." Their conversation continued through dinner, touching on their pasts, their interests, their views on everything from politics to the future of the West. Madeline found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn out of her shell by McAllister's attentive listening and thoughtful responses. As the evening drew to a close, he escorted her home, insisting it wasn't proper for a lady to walk alone after dark. The night was clear, the stars brilliant above the mountain town. "I've enjoyed this evening immensely," he told her as they reached her porch. "Would you allow me to call on you again tomorrow?" Madeline hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but caution prevailed. "Mr. McAllister, while I've enjoyed your company, I'm not sure what your intentions are, if you're seeking repayment through other means." "Miss Kerrigan." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've already told you there is no debt to repay. My interest in you has nothing to do with money and everything to do with the remarkable woman I've come to know in these past 2 days." She studied his face in the moonlight, searching for any sign of deception and finding none. "Then yes, you may call tomorrow. Father would enjoy the company as well, I'm sure. Until tomorrow, then." He took her hand and brushed his lips lightly across her knuckles. "Good night, Miss Kerrigan." Madeline watched him walk away, her hand tingling where his lips had touched. Inside, she found Mrs. Abernathy dozing in a chair by the fire. "You're back," the old woman said, blinking awake. "How was your evening?" "Pleasant," Madeline replied, unwilling to analyze her feelings further. "How is father?" "Restless earlier, but he's sleeping now. He asked about you." Mrs. Abernathy gathered her shawl. "He worries, you know, about what will happen to you after he's gone." The blunt statement struck Madeline like a physical blow, though it was nothing she hadn't thought herself. "He needn't worry. I'll manage." Mrs. Abernathy patted her arm. "Of course you will, dear, but it's a father's nature to concern himself with his daughter's future." She peered at Madeline shrewdly. "This Mr. McAllister seems a fine gentleman." "He's been kind," Madeline acknowledged, helping the old woman with her coat. "He's calling again tomorrow." "Is he indeed?" Mrs. Abernathy's smile was knowing. "How nice." After seeing her neighbor out, Madeline checked on her father, finding him sleeping peacefully. She retired to her own small bedroom, where she removed the green dress carefully, hanging it to air. As she prepared for bed, her thoughts returned to the evening's conversation. Quentin McAllister was unlike any man she had met before, confident without arrogance, successful without ostentation, kind without condescension, and she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when he smiled at her. But she had responsibilities here. Her father, the remnants of their business, the home that had been in the Kerrigan family for 2 generations. Whatever attraction she might feel toward Quentin McAllister, her life was in Georgetown. With that sobering thought, She extinguished the lamp and sought the oblivion of sleep. True to his word, McAllister called the following afternoon. He arrived bearing gifts: a basket of fresh fruit from the hotel kitchen for Thomas, a bouquet of wildflowers for Madeline, and a package of expensive tea that made Mrs. Abernathy, who had appeared as if by magic when she spotted McAllister approaching, clap her hands in delight. Thomas Kerrigan was having one of his better days. Propped up in the parlor's most comfortable chair, he engaged McAllister in conversation about the changes in the West over the past 17 years. "Mining's not what it used to be," Thomas observed, gesturing toward the mountains visible through the window. "The easy silver's gone. Now it's all about the big companies with their machinery and Eastern investors." McAllister nodded. "Same with ranching to some extent. The open range is disappearing. More fences going up every year. Progress, they call it," Thomas said with a hint of bitterness. "Seems to me it's just making it harder for a man to make his own way." "Some doors close, others open," McAllister replied. "There are still opportunities for those willing to adapt." Madeline, serving tea, was struck by the easy rapport between the two men despite their age difference. Her father, normally reserved with strangers, had welcomed McAllister almost as family. "How long will you remain in Georgetown?" Thomas asked after a while. "I'd planned to leave Friday for Denver," McAllister replied, his gaze flickering to Madeline. "But my business there isn't urgent. I could stay longer." "You mentioned a buyer expecting delivery by Saturday," Madeline reminded him, setting down her teacup. "He can wait," McAllister said simply. "Some things are more important than business." The implication hung in the air, causing Madeline to look away in momentary confusion. Was he suggesting he would delay his trip for her, Mrs. Abernathy broke the silence with a question about Wyoming winters, and the conversation moved on. But throughout the afternoon, Madeline was acutely aware of McAllister's attention, the way his eyes sought hers, the slight smile that seemed reserved just for her. When he finally rose to leave, Thomas extended his hand. "You're welcome in our home any time, Mr. McAllister. It does an old man good to have fresh company." "Thank you, sir. I'd like to invite all of you to dine with me tomorrow evening if you feel up to it." "That's very kind," Thomas began, "but I'm afraid my health, the hotel can send dinner here," McAllister suggested. "If you're willing to host, I'd be happy to provide the meal." And so it was arranged. McAllister would return the following evening with dinner from the hotel restaurant. After he left, Thomas turned to Madeline with a knowing look. "He's interested in you, daughter." She busied herself clearing the tea things. "He's being polite." "Polite doesn't involve delaying business in Denver or bringing dinner to invalids," her father countered. "Quentin McAllister sees something special in you. Can't say I blame him." "Father, please," Madeline felt her cheeks warm. "Even if he is interested, nothing can come of it. My place is here with you." Thomas's expression sobered. "Madeline, we need to speak plainly. I'm dying." "Don't say that," she protested, but he held up a hand. "It's the truth, and denying it won't change it. The doctor gives me months at best." His voice was steady despite the grim pronouncement. "I've worried about what will happen to you. A young woman alone in a town like this with no family. It's a precarious position." "I'll manage," she insisted. "I can reopen the store or find work." "The store is finished," he interrupted gently. "And what work is there for a woman in Georgetown, teaching? The school already has Miss Hanson, cooking at the hotel, cleaning rooms at the boarding house. You deserve more than that, Madeline." "What are you suggesting?" she asked, though she already knew. "I'm suggesting you consider your future with an open mind. McAllister is a good man, successful, established. He could provide security, comfort." "You want me to marry him?" A man I've known for 3 days, Thomas sighed. I want you to be happy and safe. If McAllister offers both, don't dismiss the possibility out of hand. Madeline stood abruptly. I'm not looking for a husband out of convenience or necessity. If I marry, it will be for love. Like your mother and me, Thomas said softly. Yes, she gathered the tea tray. Exactly like that. Then remember this, daughter. Love doesn't always announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly, unexpectedly, in the form of a stranger who steps forward when you need him most. She had no response to that, so she retreated to the kitchen, her father's words echoing in her mind. The following evening's dinner was a success by any measure. McAllister arrived with a wagon from the hotel, containing not only an elaborate meal but also a bottle of expensive whiskey for Thomas and additional comforts. A soft woolen blanket, several books, and a cushion designed to ease the discomfort of someone confined to a chair or bed. Mrs. Abernathy, who had appointed herself unofficial chaperone, exclaimed over the food and helped Madeline serve it. The conversation flowed easily, from local gossip to national politics to reminiscences of earlier days in the West. After dinner, when Thomas began to tire, McAllister suggested a brief walk. The evening air is mild, and you've been indoors all day, he said to Madeline. Mrs. Abernathy can surely spare you for half an hour. With her father's encouraging nod and Mrs. Abernathy's barely concealed delight, Madeline found herself strolling beside McAllister in the gathering dusk. They walked toward the small park at the center of town, where benches offered views of the mountains. Your father seems stronger today, McAllister observed as they sat. He has good days and bad, Madeline replied. Today was better than most. I think having company lifts his spirits. And you, what lifts your spirits, Madeline? It was the first time he had used her given name, and something in the way he said it sent a pleasant shiver through her. Small things, I suppose, a beautiful sunset, a good book, seeing father smile, she glanced at him, being free of Wheeler's threat. Is that all? There was a hint of challenge in his voice. What more should there be? Dreams, he suggested. Hopes for the future, things you want from life. Madeline laughed softly, but there was little humor in it. I stopped dreaming some time ago, Mr. McAllister. Reality has a way of crowding out such luxuries. Quentin, he corrected. And dreams aren't luxuries, they're necessities. They give us something to work toward, to fight for. And what are your dreams? Quentin. She tested his name cautiously. He looked toward the mountains, now silhouetted against the darkening sky. To build something lasting, not just a ranch or a business, but a legacy, a family. His gaze returned to her face. What about you? The intensity in his eyes made her look away. I used to dream of traveling, of seeing the great cities, New York, Boston, even London or Paris, of studying at a university, perhaps. Ambitious dreams for a young woman in Colorado. Hence why they remain dreams, she said with a small shrug. Now I just want security, for father to be comfortable in his remaining time, for our debts to be truly behind us. And after your father is gone, he asked gently. The blunt question might have offended her from anyone else, but his tone held only compassion, not morbid curiosity. I don't know, she admitted. The house will be mine, but it needs repairs we can't afford. The business is essentially gone. I have few marketable skills beyond keeping books and running a household. You undervalue yourself, he said firmly. You have intelligence, determination, courage. Those are worth more than specific skills. The compliment warmed her, but reality remained cold. They don't pay for food or coal in winter. What if you had options? He asked suddenly. What if you could choose any path forward without financial constraints? A lovely fantasy, she replied, rising from the bench. But the sun is setting and we should return. Father will worry. He stood as well, towering over her in the twilight. Madeline, he hesitated, then seemed to change direction. I'd like to show you something tomorrow if you're willing. A short trip outside town. Curiosity overcame her caution. What is it? A surprise, he said with a smile. I'll bring a buggy around 10 if that suits you. I'd need to arrange for someone to sit with Father. Mrs. Abernathy seemed quite eager to volunteer when I mentioned the possibility earlier. Madeline raised an eyebrow. You seem very confident of my acceptance. Hopeful, he corrected. Not confident. His humility, combined with the warmth in his eyes, made her decision easy. Very well. 10 o'clock. They walked back to the house in companionable silence, their shoulders occasionally brushing in a way that sent a current through Madeline's body. At her door, he took her hand, his thumb tracing a gentle circle on her palm. Thank you for this evening, he said softly. I should be thanking you. The dinner was wonderful. Not the dinner, he clarified. The conversation, your company. His eyes held hers. Your trust in walking with me. Before she could respond, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to it, lingering just a moment longer than propriety dictated. Until tomorrow, Madeline. She watched him stride away, her pulse racing from that simple contact. Inside, she found Mrs. Abernathy tidying the kitchen while Thomas dozed in his chair. There you are, the old woman said with a knowing smile. Your young man mentioned a trip tomorrow. I've already told Thomas I'll stay with him. He's not my young man, Madeline protested half-heartedly. And it's just a short outing. Of course, dear. Mrs. Abernathy's tone was indulgent. Now let's get your father to bed. He's had quite a full day. Later, as Madeline lay in her own bed staring at the ceiling, she wondered what Quentin wanted to show her tomorrow. More importantly, she wondered why she was so eager to find out. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Madeline dressed with care in her second-best day dress, a lavender cotton that complemented her fair complexion. She arranged her hair in a simple but flattering style, secured with her mother's silver combs. You look lovely, Thomas commented as she brought him breakfast. McAllister won't know what hit him. It's just a friendly outing, Father, she protested, though her careful preparations suggested otherwise. If you say so. His smile was knowing. Enjoy yourself, Madeline. You've earned some happiness. Precisely at 10, the sound of a buggy arriving drew her to the window. Quentin McAllister sat at the reins of a handsome rig, the polished leather seats gleaming in the sunlight. He had traded his usual practical attire for a well-tailored suit and crisp white shirt, though he still wore his customary Stetson. Mrs. Abernathy arrived moments later, shooing Madeline out the door with assurances that she had brought knitting and a novel to occupy herself while Thomas rested. Good morning, Quentin greeted, climbing down to help Madeline into the buggy. You look beautiful. Thank you. She settled onto the seat, arranging her skirts. You're quite dapper yourself. This must be quite a destination to warrant such attire. I clean up decently when required, he said with a self-deprecating smile, taking his place beside her. It's about an hour's drive. I hope you don't mind. The road wound through the mountains, offering spectacular views of peaks still capped with snow despite the June sunshine. Conversation flowed easily between them, punctuated by comfortable silences as they admired particularly striking vistas. You mentioned yesterday that you dreamed of traveling, Quentin said after one such pause. Have you ever been outside Colorado? No, she admitted. Father talked of sending me to school in St. Louis once before his illness, but it never materialized. My knowledge of the world comes from books and magazines. Books are wonderful windows but pale substitutes for experiencing places firsthand. His expression grew thoughtful. I've been fortunate to see much of this country. New York, Chicago, San Francisco. Each has its own character, its own rhythm. Tell me about them, she requested, genuinely curious. For the remainder of the journey, he painted verbal pictures of the places he'd visited. The bustling streets of New York with carriages and pedestrians in constant motion. The rebuilding of Chicago after the Great Fire. The misty beauty of San Francisco Bay. His descriptions were vivid enough that Madeline could almost imagine herself there. "You should have been a writer," she told him when he finished. "You have a gift for bringing places to life with words." "Just an observant traveler," he demurred. "Ah, we're nearly there." The buggy rounded a bend and Madeline gasped. Before them lay a small valley, brilliantly green in the summer sun. A crystal-clear lake occupied its center, reflecting the mountains beyond. Near the shore stood a substantial log home, its wide porch facing the water. "What is this place?" she asked as Quentin guided the horses down a well-maintained drive toward the house. "Morning Glory Valley," he replied. "Named for the wildflowers that bloom here in spring. And this," he gestured toward the house, "is a property I acquired recently." Understanding dawned. "You brought me to see your new house," in a manner of speaking. He reined in the horses before the porch and set the brake. "Come inside." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior suggested. Though sparsely furnished, the main room featured a massive stone fireplace, polished wooden floors, and large windows that captured the spectacular view. A kitchen, dining area, and several doors leading to what Madeline assumed were bedrooms completed the first floor. "It's beautiful," she said honestly, "though rather large for a single man." "My thoughts exactly." Quentin's expression was unreadable as he watched her explore the space. The previous owner built it for his family, but his wife refused to live so far from town. "He sold it to me at a considerable loss." "How far are we from Georgetown?" "About 5 miles as the crow flies, longer by road." Madeline moved to the window, gazing out at the peaceful lake. "It's so quiet here, like another world. That's what attracted me." He came to stand beside her. "I've always appreciated solitude but not isolation, the perfect balance between privacy and accessibility." She turned to him, suddenly aware of how alone they were. "Why did you bring me here, Quentin?" He met her gaze steadily. "Because I wanted you to see it, to imagine possibilities." "What possibilities?" she asked, though something in his expression made her heart beat faster. Instead of answering directly, he gestured toward the porch. "Let's have lunch. I brought a picnic." Outside, he spread a blanket on the porch and unpacked a basket containing cold chicken, bread, cheese, and a bottle of wine. They ate in companionable silence for a while, enjoying the view and the gentle breeze that carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. "Madeline," he said finally, setting aside his plate, "I need to be honest with you about something." Her stomach tightened with sudden apprehension. "Yes, my arrival in Georgetown wasn't entirely coincidental." He held up a hand as she opened her mouth to speak. "Please, let me explain. I've been corresponding with Holloway Bank for several months regarding investments in the area. During those communications, Thomas Kerrigan's name came up as a respected businessman facing difficulties. You knew about our situation before you came to Georgetown?" she asked, pieces falling into place. "I knew your father owed money to Wheeler, yes. I didn't know the full circumstances or that Wheeler planned to collect in the manner he attempted." Madeline stood abruptly, moving to the porch railing. "So your intervention wasn't spontaneous generosity?" "It was planned." "Not exactly." He rose to join her, though he maintained a respectful distance. "I came to Georgetown with the intention of helping your father, yes, but I expected to offer a business partnership or loan with reasonable terms." What I found was a more urgent situation that required immediate action. She turned to face him. Why? Why would you care about a stranger's debts? Because 17 years ago, your father was the only person who believed in me enough to extend credit when I had nothing but determination and a good horse. His voice was earnest. That kindness changed the course of my life, Madeline. Without the supplies he provided on nothing but a handshake and a promise, I wouldn't have made it to Wyoming, wouldn't have gotten the ranch job that eventually led to everything I have now. So it was a debt of honor, she said slowly, repaying an old kindness. Initially, yes. He took a step closer. But then I met you. The simple statement hung in the air between them, charged with meaning. Quentin, let me finish, please. His eyes held hers. I didn't expect you, Madeline, your strength, your loyalty, your grace under impossible circumstances. I came to repay a debt and found something I hadn't realized I was searching for. What are you saying? She whispered, though her heart already knew. I'm saying that in the past 4 days, I've come to care for you in a way I didn't think possible in such a short time. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. I'm saying that this house, this valley, I bought them 3 weeks ago with the idea of creating a retreat, a place to escape the pressures of business. But since meeting you, I've begun to see it differently, as a home, a place for a future. Madeline's mind whirled with conflicting emotions, disbelief, hope, fear, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. This is too sudden, she managed finally. You barely know me. I know enough, he countered gently. I know your character, your heart. The rest, favorite colors, books, foods, those are details we can discover together over time. My father would be welcome here, of course. The mountain air might even improve his condition. And if not, at least his remaining time would be comfortable, free from financial worry. She pulled her hand away, needing space to think. You make it sound so simple. It can be. He didn't pursue her, allowing her the distance she needed. I'm not proposing marriage today, Madeline. I'm too practical to expect that, and I respect you too much to rush your decision. I'm simply asking you to consider possibilities. What possibilities exactly? She asked, echoing her earlier question. The possibility of getting to know each other better, of seeing if what I feel, what I hope you might come to feel, could grow into something lasting. He gestured at the valley spreading before them. The possibility that this place could be a fresh start for both of us. Madeline closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed. When she opened them, Quentin was watching her with patient understanding. I need time, she said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. He had feared outright rejection. Take all the time you need. My business in Denver can wait. The ride back to Georgetown was quieter than the journey out, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the town, Quentin broke the silence. I hope I haven't made you uncomfortable with my honesty. No, she assured him. I appreciate your candor, it's just unexpected. Life often is, he replied with a small smile, the best parts especially. At her home, he helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary. The contact sent a flutter through her stomach that had nothing to do with fear or confusion. Will you think about what I said? He asked quietly. I doubt I'll be able to think of anything else, she admitted, his smile widened. Good, that's a start. He released her and stepped back. I'll call tomorrow if I may, she nodded, then impulsively reached out to touch his arm. Thank you for today, the valley is beautiful. Like its visitor, he replied simply, then climbed back into the buggy with a tip of his hat. Madeline watched him drive away, her emotions in turmoil. Inside, she found her father awake and alert, Mrs. Abernathy serving him tea. There she is, Thomas said with a knowing smile. How was your outing? Illuminating, she replied, removing her hat and gloves. Mr. McAllister showed me a property he's purchased near town, a lovely house by a lake. Morning Glory Valley, Thomas nodded. The old Henderson place, beautiful spot. You know it, everyone knows it. Henderson built that house to impress his Boston bride, but she took one look at the isolation and refused to stay. Been empty for years. He studied his daughter. McAllister has good taste in property and in company. Madeline sank into a chair, suddenly weary. Father, did you know Quentin came to Georgetown specifically because of our situation? He knew about Wheeler, about the debt. Thomas didn't seem surprised. I suspected as much. A man like McAllister doesn't appear out of nowhere with $2,000 in his pocket by coincidence. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered? He countered. His motive seemed honorable enough, and the way he looks at you. Thomas smiled. Well, that's certainly genuine, Mrs. Abernathy, who had been pretending not to listen while arranging cookies on a plate, finally gave up the pretense. Did he propose, dear? Mrs. Jenkins at the boarding house has a wager with Mr. Morris from the livery that he will before the week is out. Mrs. Abernathy. Madeline exclaimed, her cheeks flaming. The entire town is gossiping about this. Of course they are, the old woman replied matter-of-factly. What else is there to talk about in Georgetown? Besides, it's a romantic story. Handsome stranger rides into town, saves the banker's daughter from a fate worse than death, falls madly in love. I'm not the banker's daughter, Madeline corrected automatically. And no one said anything about madly in love. Didn't he, Mrs. Abernathy raised an eyebrow. Then what did he say exactly? Madeline sighed, knowing she wouldn't have peace until she shared at least part of the conversation. He said he cares for me and wants us to get to know each other better, that he sees possibilities for a future. Well, that's practically a proposal in man language, Mrs. Abernathy declared triumphantly. Men don't talk about futures unless they're serious. What did you tell him? Thomas asked, his expression more serious now. That I need time to think. Madeline stood restlessly. It's all happening so quickly. 4 days ago, I was preparing to be taken to Denver by Wheeler. Now I'm contemplating. What? Moving to a remote valley with a man I barely know. With a man who paid $2,000 to protect you, Thomas reminded her gently. Who has shown nothing but respect and consideration since. That doesn't mean I should append my entire life on a romantic impulse. No, her father agreed, but it might mean he's worth getting to know better, worth considering. He reached for her hand. Madeline, I won't pretend I'm not relieved by this turn of events. I've worried about leaving you alone, vulnerable. I'm stronger than you think, she protested. I know exactly how strong you are, he countered, but strength doesn't preclude loneliness or hardship. If McAllister offers companionship and security alongside respect and affection, that's a rare combination. Madeline couldn't argue with that logic, though her emotions remained tangled. I told him I'd consider it. That's all I can promise right now. Fair enough. Thomas squeezed her hand. Now, tell us about this house. Is it as grand as people say? The rest of the evening was spent in lighter conversation, but as Madeline prepared for bed, her mind returned again and again to Quentin's words. I didn't expect you, Madeline. The feeling, she admitted to herself in the darkness of her room, was entirely mutual. The next morning, Madeline woke with a sense of purpose. After serving her father breakfast and ensuring he was comfortable, she walked into town, heading directly for the Georgetown Hotel. She found Quentin in the restaurant, reviewing papers over coffee. He rose immediately when he saw her, surprise and pleasure evident in his expression. Madeline, good morning. I wasn't expecting to see you until later. I know. May I join you, of course? He held her chair, then resumed his seat, setting aside his papers. "Is everything all right?" "Yes." She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about your proposition." And his face revealed nothing, but his knuckles whitened slightly as he gripped his coffee cup. "I have questions." "Practical ones." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'd expect nothing less. Ask away." "If, and I emphasize if I were to consider your suggestion, what exactly would it entail, in practical terms?" He leaned forward, his manner businesslike despite the personal nature of their discussion. "In practical terms, I would propose that you, your father, and I relocate to Morning Glory Valley. You would have your own bedroom, of course separate from mine," he added quickly, "until such time as our relationship might progress to marriage, if that's what we both wish. Your father would have comfortable accommodations and whatever medical care he requires, and my role would be whatever you wish it to be," he said simply. "Mistress of the household, certainly. Beyond that, it would be your decision." "And if, after some time, we determine we're not suited," she pressed, "what then?" "Then I would ensure you and your father have the means to establish yourselves elsewhere with no obligation to me." His gaze was steady. "I'm not offering charity, Madeline, nor am I seeking a housekeeper. I'm proposing an opportunity for us to build something together as equals." She nodded slowly. "And your business? You mentioned the ranch in Wyoming, deliveries to Denver. My foreman manages the ranch quite capably in my absence. I typically travel to Denver once a month for business, and to the ranch quarterly." He smiled. "I've been considering establishing a smaller horse breeding operation here in Colorado. The valley would be ideal for that purpose." "You've thought this through," she observed. "I've had little else on my mind since we met," he admitted. Madeline studied him, this man who had upended her life so thoroughly in less than a week. His expression was open, his eyes clear and direct. There was no artifice in him, no hidden agenda she could detect. "I need to be honest with you as well, Quentin. I don't know if what I feel is love." She stumbled slightly over the word. "Gratitude, certainly. Attraction, yes." Her cheeks warmed at the admission. "But love, I'm not sure." "I wouldn't expect you to be," he said gently. "Love grows, Madeline. It builds on foundation stones of respect, trust, shared experiences. I believe we have the beginnings of those foundations. The rest would come with time." His words resonated with her, echoing her father's advice about love arriving quietly, unexpectedly. "One more question," she said after a moment. "Why me? You could have any woman from here to Cheyenne. Why choose someone with so many complications?" Quentin's expression softened. "Because complications indicate a life fully lived. Because your loyalty to your father shows a depth of character rare in this world. Because when you smile, really smile, not the polite version you show to society, it transforms your entire being." He reached across the table to touch her hand lightly. "Because in you, I see someone who could be not just a wife but a partner, an equal, someone to build a life with, not someone to decorate it." His answer struck her speechless. It was perhaps the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to her, and its sincerity was unmistakable. "I need to talk to my father," she said finally. "This affects him as much as me, of course." Quentin withdrew his hand. "Take all the time you need." "Not all the time," she corrected with a small smile. "Just a little more." His answering smile was like sunrise after a long night. "I'll be here." Madeline walked home slowly, her mind clearer than it had been in days. When she entered the house, she found Thomas sitting in his chair by the window, a book open on his lap. "I saw you heading toward the hotel," he said without preamble. "Did you reach a decision?" "Not yet." She sat beside him. "But I'm closer. I wanted to talk to you about it. I'm listening, if I were to." Accept Quentin's offer. Would you be willing to move to Morning Glory Valley? It would mean leaving Georgetown, the house, everything familiar. Thomas closed his book. Madeline, at this point in my life, what matters to me is your happiness and security. The house is just wood and nails. Georgetown is just a place. But your memories of mother are here, she pointed out gently. Your mother is here, he replied, tapping his chest. And here. He touched his temple. I don't need a specific location to remember her. Madeline nodded, considering his words. And you wouldn't feel displaced. Moving into another man's home, McAllister strikes me as the type who would make it clear I was welcome. Thomas studied his daughter. Is that what's holding you back? Concern for me? Partly, she admitted, and partly fear, I suppose, of making a mistake, of trusting too quickly. Valid concerns, her father acknowledged. But consider this. Staying here, maintaining the status quo, is also a choice. One with its own risks and consequences. I know, she sighed. When Mother died, you had to make difficult choices for our future. How did you know what was right? Thomas's eyes grew distant with memory. I didn't, not with certainty. I made the best decision I could with the information I had, guided by what I believed would provide the most love and security for you. He smiled sadly. Some choices worked out better than others, but I never regretted trying to create a good life for us. And now I need to do the same, Madeline murmured. With one advantage I didn't have, he pointed out. You're not alone in this decision. You have a partner offering to share the journey. If I accept, she qualified. If you accept, he agreed. But Madeline, don't let fear of the unknown prevent you from reaching for happiness. Life is too short for such regrets. The weight of his words, coming from a man who knew his time was limited, settled deeply in her heart. Thank you, Father. For what? For always guiding me without controlling me, for trusting me to find my own way. That's what parents do, he said simply, or should anyway. Madeline leaned forward to kiss his cheek, then rose. I need some time alone to think. Take a walk, he suggested. The mountains always helped clear my head. She followed his advice, hiking up the trail that led to the small overlook above town. The climb was steep but short, and soon she was seated on a flat rock. Georgetown spread beneath her like a miniature village. From this vantage point, she could see the essential smallness of the town: a few streets, a scattering of buildings, the steeple of the church rising above surrounding structures. It had been her entire world for 22 years, and while she loved it, she had to acknowledge its limitations. What awaited her beyond Georgetown? What could life with Quentin offer that wasn't available here? Security, certainly, comfort, the chance to care for her father without constant financial worry. But more than that, companionship, partnership, perhaps in time, love. The risk was substantial. If things went poorly, she would be far from everything familiar, dependent on a man she was still coming to know. But if they went well, Madeline closed her eyes, trying to imagine a future at Morning Glory Valley. She pictured the house by the lake, filled with light and laughter. Her father resting comfortably on the porch, watching the water. Quentin returning from his business, his face lighting up when he saw her. Children, perhaps, running through wildflower meadows. It was a beautiful vision, fragile as morning mist but enticing in its possibilities. She opened her eyes, decision made. The path forward wasn't without uncertainty, but nothing worthwhile ever was. Her father had taken a chance on life after losing his wife. Quentin had taken a chance coming to Georgetown to repay an old debt. Now it was her turn to be brave. The sun was lowering toward the western peaks as Madeline descended the trail and made her way to the hotel. She found Quentin in the lobby, apparently preparing to leave. Madeline, he said, surprise evident in his voice. I was just coming to see you. I've made my decision, she told him without preamble. His expression became carefully neutral. I see. Would you like to sit down? No, she smiled, suddenly shy despite her determination. I mean, yes, I accept your offer. I'd like to try, to see what might develop between us. The transformation in his face was immediate, and profound tension melting into relief, restraint giving way to joy. You're sure? As sure as I can be about anything so new and unexpected, she replied honestly. I can't promise I'm in love with you, Quentin. But I care for you, I respect you, and I'm willing to see where those feelings might lead. That's all I ask. He took her hands in his, mindful of their public location but unable to completely hide his elation. When would you like to move to the valley? Soon, she decided. Father is having a good spell right now. It would be best to relocate while he's strong enough to travel comfortably. I'll make all the arrangements. He squeezed her hands gently. Madeline, I promise you won't regret this. Don't make promises neither of us can be certain of, she cautioned. Just promise to be honest, to be kind, and to give us a fair chance. That I can promise without reservation, he said solemnly. Honesty, kindness, and every effort to build something beautiful together. Then that's enough for now. She allowed herself a full smile, feeling lighter than she had in months. The rest we'll discover day by day. The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Quentin hired men to pack the Kerrigans' belongings and transport them to Morning Glory Valley. He arranged for a doctor from Denver to visit Thomas regularly. He purchased new furnishings to make the house more comfortable, and employed a woman from a nearby farm to help with cooking and cleaning. Throughout it all, Madeline watched him with growing appreciation. His efficiency was impressive, but more striking was his consideration. He consulted her on every decision, from which furniture to move to what supplies to stock in the kitchen. He treated her not as a charity case or a future possession, but as a partner whose opinions mattered. The day of the move dawned clear and mild. Thomas, excited despite his weakened condition, insisted on sitting up in the wagon Quentin had outfitted with cushions and blankets for his comfort. A new adventure, he declared, as they left the house that had been his home for over 30 years. At my age, I never expected another one. Madeline, riding beside him, squeezed his hand. Are you sure you're strong enough for the journey? Strong enough for this and more, he assured her, though his pallor suggested otherwise. I want to see you settled, Madeline. To know you'll be all right. The unspoken "after I'm gone" hung between them, acknowledged but not dwelled upon. Quentin rode alongside, occasionally checking on Thomas's comfort or pointing out landmarks as they followed the winding road to the valley. When they crested the final hill, the sight of the lake gleaming in the morning sun drew exclamations of appreciation from both Kerrigans. It's even more beautiful than I remembered, Madeline said softly. Welcome home, Quentin replied, the simple words carrying a weight of promise. The first days in their new home established a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Thomas spent mornings on the porch, afternoons napping, and evenings engaged in chess games or conversation with Quentin. Madeline organized the household, exploring the house and surroundings, gradually making the space her own. Quentin was attentive but never intrusive, offering companionship without pressure. They took walks around the lake, rode horseback through the valley, and talked late into the evening after Thomas retired. Through these conversations, Madeline learned about Quentin's past, his difficult childhood with a neglectful uncle, his determination to make his own way in the world, his failures and successes in building his ranch and business interests. In turn, she shared her own history, happy childhood memories, her mother's absence in her life, her education in the Georgetown school, her dreams and disappointments. With each exchange, the foundation between them strengthened, mutual understanding deepening into genuine affection. A month after their move, Dr. Harrison from Denver confirmed what they already knew. Thomas Kerrigan's condition was deteriorating more rapidly than expected. "The mountain air hasn't helped as much as I'd hoped," the doctor told Madeline privately after examining her father. "His lungs are too damaged. I'd estimate weeks rather than months now." Though the news wasn't unexpected, it hit Madeline hard. That evening, after her father was asleep, she sat on the porch steps, gazing at the star-strewn sky with tears streaming silently down her face. Quentin found her there, settling beside her without a word. After a moment, he simply put his arm around her shoulders, offering comfort without platitudes. "I've always known this was coming," she said finally, "but knowing doesn't make it any easier." "No," he agreed quietly. "It doesn't. He's been my whole world for so long. I don't know who I am without him." "You're Madeline Kerrigan," Quentin said firmly. "Strong, intelligent, compassionate. Your father helped shape you, but you exist independently of him." She leaned into his solid warmth. "He was so pleased about our arrangement, about leaving me with protection." "Not just protection," Quentin corrected gently. "Partnership, companionship." He hesitated, then added, "love." The word hung in the night air, more declaration than suggestion. Madeline turned to look at him, his features silver-edged in the moonlight. "Love," she repeated softly. "Is that what this is becoming?" "For me," he acknowledged, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "It already has. I love you, Madeline. I think perhaps I have since that first day in the saloon when you stood so proudly despite your circumstances." Her heart swelled with an emotion too complex to name: gratitude, tenderness, and something deeper, something that had been growing quietly within her over these past weeks. "I'm not ready to say those words yet," she admitted, "but I'm closer than I ever imagined possible in so short a time." He smiled, understanding in his eyes. "Then I'll wait, however long it takes." Impulsively, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to their first kiss, sweet and brief but filled with promise. "Thank you," she whispered as she pulled away, "for everything." His fingers brushed her cheek tenderly. "No thanks necessary. This is where I want to be. With you, whatever comes." The weeks that followed were bittersweet. Thomas grew weaker by the day, but he remained alert and engaged, taking evident pleasure in watching Madeline and Quentin together. He insisted on being outside as much as possible, seated in his favorite spot on the porch with views of the lake and mountains. "You two should marry soon," he announced one evening as they sat together after dinner. "No sense waiting on my account, Father." Madeline exclaimed, embarrassed but not entirely surprised. Thomas had become increasingly direct as his condition worsened. "I'm not being morbid, just practical," he insisted. "I'd like to see you settled before I go." Quentin, who had been initially startled by Thomas's bluntness, recovered quickly. "Sir, I would be honored to marry your daughter whenever she's ready, but I don't want her to feel rushed, especially not during this difficult time." Thomas fixed him with a penetrating gaze. "Do you love her?" "Yes, sir, very much. And you'll care for her, protect her, cherish her as she deserves. With everything I have and everything I am," Quentin promised solemnly. Thomas nodded, satisfied, then turned to Madeline. "And you, daughter, what are your feelings for this man?" Put on the spot, Madeline hesitated. She'd been approaching the realization for days now, but saying it aloud, especially under these circumstances, seemed daunting. Yet looking at Quentin, his patient expression, his quiet strength, she found the courage to voice what her heart already knew. "I love him," she said simply. "I didn't expect to, not so soon, but I do." The joy that bloomed on Quentin's face was worth any momentary discomfort her public declaration might have caused. "Well then, Thomas said with evident satisfaction. "That's settled. Parson Williams from Georgetown could come out here. No need for a big ceremony, just the vows and God's blessing." "Father, this should be Quentin's and my decision," Madeline protested gently. "Of course it should," Thomas agreed. "I'm just offering a suggestion, an old man's request." Quentin reached for Madeline's hand. "What do you think? Would you consider a simple ceremony here soon? Not because of external pressure," he added quickly, "but because it feels right to us." She studied him, seeing nothing but sincerity and love in his gaze. The truth was, it did feel right. Their connection, though new, was deep and genuine. What purpose would waiting serve, especially when it would mean so much to her father to witness their union? Yes, she decided. A simple ceremony here would be perfect. The joy on both men's faces confirmed she had made the right choice. The wedding took place 2 weeks later on the shore of the lake. Parson Williams came from Georgetown, bringing with him Mrs. Abernathy and a few other close friends who had been invited to witness the occasion. Thomas, frailer than ever but determined, sat in a chair of honor beside the makeshift altar. Madeline wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Mrs. Abernathy to fit her slender frame. Quentin, handsome in a new suit from Denver, watched her approach with an expression of such reverent joy that Madeline felt tears spring to her eyes. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, their vows exchanged with genuine emotion. When the parson pronounced them husband and wife, Quentin's kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The small reception that followed was a joyful affair despite Thomas's evident exhaustion. He rallied long enough to toast the newlyweds and share a dance with Madeline, supported by Quentin's strong arm. "I can go peacefully now," he told her as they swayed gently to the music provided by a local fiddler. "Knowing you're loved, cared for." "Don't talk about going anywhere," she chided gently. "You're still needed here." His smile was knowing. "I've done what I came to do, daughter, raised you to be the woman you are. The rest is in your hands and his." He glanced at Quentin, who was conversing with guests nearby but keeping a watchful eye on his new father-in-law. "He's a good man, different from the boy I knew, but the same in all the ways that matter." "I know," she said softly. "I'm very fortunate, not fortune," Thomas corrected. "Deservedness. You've earned this happiness, Madeline." That night, after the guests had departed and Thomas was settled comfortably in his room, Madeline found herself facing a new threshold, her first night as Quentin's wife. Despite the natural nervousness any bride might feel, she approached their bedroom with a sense of rightness, of coming home in the deepest sense. Quentin was waiting for her, his expression a mix of desire and tenderness. "Mrs. McAllister," he greeted her, the new name still unfamiliar but welcome. "Mr. McAllister," she replied with a smile, stepping into the circle of his arms. His kiss was different now, deeper, unrestrained by the propriety that had governed their previous encounters. Madeline responded in kind, her own passion rising to meet his. "I love you," he murmured against her lips, "more than I ever thought possible." "Show me," she whispered, and he did, their bodies and hearts joining in a union as profound as the vows they had exchanged earlier that day. Thomas Kerrigan passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks after the wedding. Though expected, his loss left Madeline bereft, a fundamental pillar of her world now gone. Quentin was her rock during this time, handling funeral arrangements, receiving mourners, and most importantly, providing the steady, undemanding presence she needed as she grieved. They buried Thomas in a peaceful spot overlooking the lake, marking his grave with a simple headstone that read, "Thomas James Kerrigan, beloved father, honorable man." He would have liked this place, Quentin observed as they stood together after the small funeral service. Close enough to visit often with a view he loved. Yes, Madeline agreed, her hand in his. He was happy here these last weeks, happier than I'd seen him in years. Because you were happy, Quentin said gently. That's what mattered most to him. The months that followed brought healing, as grief gradually gave way to fond remembrance. Madeline and Quentin settled into married life with a naturalness that sometimes amazed them both. Their days fell into pleasant rhythms. Mornings spent on household and ranch matters, afternoons often devoted to shared activities or individual pursuits, evenings filled with conversation, reading aloud, or simply enjoying each other's company. Quentin's business occasionally took him to Denver or Wyoming, but he never stayed away longer than necessary, and his returns were joyful reunions. Madeline, meanwhile, discovered talents and interests that had been submerged during her years of caring for her father. She proved to have a keen eye for horse flesh, helping Quentin establish a small but select breeding operation in the valley. She also began writing articles for ladies' magazines, sharing perspectives on Western life that found an eager audience back east. A year after their wedding, as spring once again brought wildflowers to the valley, Madeline shared news that completed their happiness. They would welcome a child before winter. "A baby," Quentin repeated, wonder and delight suffusing his face as he gently placed his hand on her still flat abdomen. "Our child. Are you pleased?" she asked, though his expression already gave her the answer. Pleased doesn't begin to describe it. He gathered her into his arms. Ecstatic. Terrified, grateful beyond words, she laughed, understanding perfectly. "That's exactly how I feel." "Your father would have been so happy," he said softly. "Yes," she smiled through sudden tears. "He'd have been a wonderful grandfather." "We'll make sure our child knows about him," Quentin promised. "About the kind of man he was, the difference he made in so many lives, especially mine. Without him extending credit to a young cowboy, we might never have met," Madeline mused. "I'd have found you somehow," Quentin replied with certainty. "Some things are meant to be." As they stood together in the doorway of their home, the valley stretching before them in all its spring glory, Madeline reflected on the strange turns fate had taken. A year and a half ago, she had faced the darkest moment of her life, believing herself destined for a future of degradation and despair. Now she stood on the threshold of a new chapter, surrounded by love, security, and hope. "What are you thinking?" Quentin asked, his arms encircling her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. "That sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones," she replied, leaning back against his solid strength. "That sometimes creditors at the door can be the beginning of a love story, not the end of everything." He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her back. "An unusual perspective, but I can't argue with the result." Madeline turned in his embrace to face him, her heart full to overflowing with love for this man who had changed her life so completely. "Do you remember what you said that first day, when Wheeler came to collect me?" "I said many things that day," he reminded her. "Most of them inadequate to express what I was feeling. You said, 'She stays here.'" Madeline's eyes held his. 3 simple words that altered everything. "The best decision I ever made," Quentin said softly, lowering his head to kiss her. As their lips met, Madeline knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world, not in Georgetown or even specifically in Morning Glory Valley, but here, in this man's arms, in the life they were creating together. She stayed, and in staying, found everything she had never dared to dream might be hers. 7 years later, Morning Glory Valley was transformed. The once empty house was now filled with life and laughter. home to not only Quentin and Madeline but also their 3 children. Thomas, aged 6, named for his grandfather; Elizabeth, 4, with her mother's chestnut hair and her father's storm-gray eyes; and Michael, just learning to walk at 18 months. The small horse breeding operation had flourished under their joint management, producing animals sought after throughout the West for their intelligence, stamina, and gentle temperament. Madeline's writing had expanded from magazine articles to a successful novel about frontier life, and she was now at work on a second. On a golden autumn afternoon, the family gathered on the porch to welcome Quentin home from a business trip to Denver. The children spotted him first, his tall figure on horseback cresting the hill that led down to the lake. "Papa!" Thomas shouted, racing down the path with Elizabeth close behind, both children trying to reach their father first. Madeline followed more sedately, carrying Michael on her hip. The toddler squirmed excitedly when he recognized the approaching rider. Quentin dismounted in a fluid motion, sweeping Thomas up for a hug before setting him down to greet Elizabeth with equal enthusiasm. Then he strode toward Madeline, his face alight with the joy of homecoming. "Welcome back," she said, reaching up for his kiss. "It's good to be home." He took Michael from her arms, tossing the giggling child gently before settling him against his shoulder. "I missed you all terribly. Was your business successful?" she asked as they walked together toward the house, the older children dancing around them with excited questions about Denver. "Very," he confirmed with satisfaction. "The Army contract is finalized. They'll take 20 horses next spring, with an option for 20 more in the fall." "That's wonderful news." Madeline squeezed his free hand. "Did you bring presents?" she added in a teasing whisper, knowing the children were listening eagerly. "Would I dare return empty-handed?" he replied with mock indignation. "There may be a few small tokens in my saddlebags." This announcement sent Thomas and Elizabeth racing back to his horse, arguing good-naturedly about who would carry what. Later, after the children's excitement over their gifts, a book of adventure stories for Thomas, a porcelain doll for Elizabeth, and a stuffed bear for Michael had subsided and they were tucked into bed, Quentin and Madeline sat together on the porch. The night was cool but not cold, the stars brilliant in the clear mountain sky. "I have something for you too," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Though it's not exactly a gift." He handed her an envelope bearing the return address of a prestigious New York publishing house. "What's this?" she asked, puzzled. "Open it and see." Inside was a letter confirming that Madeline's novel would be published in a special edition with illustrations by a noted artist. The print run would be substantial, the distribution nationwide. "Quentin," she gasped, "how did you arrange this?" "I had nothing to do with it beyond carrying the letter from the post office in Denver," he assured her. "This is all your accomplishment, my love, your talent recognized as it deserves to be." She read the letter again, hardly able to believe the words. "A national release. I never imagined." "I did," he said simply. "From the first time you let me read your work, I knew others would connect with your voice, your perspective." Madeline leaned into his embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude not just for this opportunity, but for the unwavering support that had made it possible. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much my life has changed," she murmured. 7 years ago I thought I had no future. Now you have everything you deserve," he completed. "Success, security, a family who adores you." "A husband who believes in me," she added, turning to kiss him properly. "That's worth more than all the rest combined." He smiled against her lips. "I've been thinking. With the new Army contract and your book's success, perhaps it's time for that trip east you've always dreamed about. New York, Boston, perhaps even London if you're interested." "Really?" She pulled back to study his face. "You'd leave the ranch that long? For a few months, why not? Anderson can manage things here. The children are old enough to travel comfortably. And you deserve to see the places you've read about all these years." The prospect was tantalizing. "I'd love that, but only if you're sure it won't disrupt your business too severely." "Some things are more important than business," he said, echoing a sentiment he'd expressed years ago. "Besides, I'd enjoy showing you New York, watching you experience it for the first time." Madeline's heart swelled with love for this man who continually sought ways to fulfill her dreams. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "You have," he confirmed with a smile, "but I never tire of hearing it. I love you, Quentin McAllister." She traced the lines of his face, still handsome but now marked with 7 years of shared joys and challenges. "For saving me when I needed saving, for giving me space to find myself afterward, and for building this beautiful life with me." "I love you, Madeline McAllister," he returned, capturing her hand and kissing her palm. "For accepting the help you needed without surrendering your independence, for bringing warmth and purpose to my life, and for making me happier than I ever imagined possible." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moon's reflection shimmer on the lake. The house behind them, once empty and echoing, now radiated the quiet energy of a sleeping family, their family, created through an unlikely series of events that began with debt and desperation, but transformed into something infinitely precious. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Madeline asked eventually. "If you hadn't been in Georgetown that day, if Wheeler had taken me to Denver?" "I try not to," Quentin admitted, his arms tightening around her at the thought. "But I believe some version of us would have found each other eventually. Your father's kindness connected us across the years. That thread would have drawn us together somehow, sometime." "My practical husband, speaking of fate," she teased gently. "Even practical men can believe in destiny when it brings them exactly where they're meant to be," he replied, his voice warm with certainty. Madeline couldn't argue with that. Looking back at the path that had led her here, from fear to hope, from isolation to connection, from mere survival to abundant life, she could only be grateful for every step, even the painful ones. "She stays here," she murmured, echoing his words from that fateful day. "Forever," he agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that still held all the tenderness of their first, all the passion of their wedding night, and now the deep, abiding certainty of a love tested by time and found unshakable. In the house on the shore of the lake, surrounded by the beauty of Morning Glory Valley, the McAllister family continued to build their legacy, one day, one memory, one moment of love at a time. What had begun as an act of repayment had blossomed into something far richer. A life shared, challenges overcome together, joys multiplied through sharing. And Madeline, who had once believed her dreams beyond reach, discovered that reality could surpass even the most hopeful imagination when love provided the foundation. She had stayed, and in staying, had found everything.